Our parasha this Shabbat is the last Shabbat, the last parasha of Genesis, and it's the first Shabbat in the year 2026. So there's a sense of beginning and a sense of ending, but definitely the concept of our parasha, and of course in the Torah in general, is that every ending is a beginning. And we start with the just the name of the parasha. The name of the parasha is Vayechi, and that means Vayechi, he lived. But the and it talks about Jacob who dies in Egypt, and then Joseph dies, but yet Vayechi, he lived. And we have another parasha that has the same idea, and that's Chayei Sarah, the lives of Sarah, when she dies and Abraham dies, and it's the same idea that the Torah wants to convey to us that there's life after death, and that life, as in its uh, by definition, life is the breath of God. We just spoke about the breath of God, and that's infinite, so it never dies. It can't, by definition, die. Just like we have death, that's what its purpose in life or in our world is, to kill, is to move things to the next phase. Life is the other force that never dies. So I think it's a very comforting idea, and even in the in the where the New Testament says it's the good news, gospel means a good news. They they say the same thing, that there's life after death, there's resurrection, it never goes away, and that really is the best news you can have. So even if we pass on, or somebody in our lives passes on, we know that they are not here in body, but their essence is somehow still here. And that's why we, of course, light candles and remembering people. And many people feel like they feel the person. And also, when we have dreams about people, that is a blessing, because it means that they're visiting us, or we were allowed a visitation with them somehow. So this is a very, very important thing. So in our parasha, the Jacob, it says that Jacob lived for 17 years in Egypt after he came with all his family, and after they reunited with Joseph. So it says that he lived 17 years, and that is the years of Jacob are 147 years altogether. And the interesting thing is that the rabbis tell us that Vayechi, the numerical value of Vayechi, if you take that word of four letters, it comes to 34. And they say that actually Jacob really, really lived for 34 years. Out of his 147 years, he really lived 34 years. And how do they arrive this conclusion? Because he lived with Joseph for 34 years, 17 years before he disappeared, and then 17 years in Egypt with him. So 34 years were really his full life. So it's, of course, it's a big message about how we feel about our children, and that they give us life, of course, and so forth. Um, but then he was going to die, and he knew that, and he calls Joseph, and of all the people, he calls Joseph. I mean, there are different ways to look at it. One is because he was Joseph was his favorite son, as we know it, and was supposed to be the one carrying the birthright from Rachel, that he was supposed to originally marry Rachel. But the Talmud says also that he is um, honoring him, respecting him as the person of a position in Egypt. He is the prime minister, and he's honored that way. So even when Joseph comes to Jacob, Jacob honors him as a person of position. So then um, Joseph brings his children. He brings Manasseh and Ephraim. These are his two sons that were born really within the 17 years that they were there, but there were 9 years before the family reunited, so they could be the most 17 plus 9 is 26. Let's say it took a couple of years, so they are no older than 24, the two children, and we know that Menashe is the older, and then Ephraim. So they're probably both in their early 20s somehow, and or maybe just in their late teens. And Joseph brings them to Jacob, and this is our big drama here that is actually not dramatic, but it's a drama that is not dramatic if you can think about it. With the it's almost like an argument from silence. There's drama here that is so loaded, but it happens in a very quiet way. And what happens is Joseph brings the children to Joseph, and of course Jacob blesses Joseph first, and he says, "The Almighty appeared to me in Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me," and he said, "May He bless you too," and said to Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply, and I will make you a multitude of people, and will give this land to send after you for every everlasting possession. So now, after he gives that blessing, he says to Joseph, "Now I want to bless your children." And he said, "Now your children, Ephraim and Manasseh," again, he already changes the name order from the older is Manasseh and Ephraim is the younger, but he's already mentioning Ephraim first. So we know, and we're very sensitive at this point, that this could create a lot of drama when you put the younger before the older, right? Starts with Cain and Abel. It goes to Isaac and Ishmael, to Jacob and Esau himself. But yet he somehow continues it. And we talked about it last Shabbat, how Joseph continues to favor his brother Benjamin. He gave him more of the clothing because there's a principle here that may be very hard to accept, but that is what Judaism changes in the world. It's based on merit. It's not based on the birth order, and it's based on the qualification. I always give that example. If a family has a factory and it's a very successful factory, the parent is not going to let the older child that may not be qualified to run the factory, because they know better that you need the qualified person to do that. So he says, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt, and I want them to be like my children. He's like he says, Kireuven v'Shimon, like Reuben and Simeon, the two older children of Jacob. And what he means that he is elevating them. And if you remember last week when we talked about how Joseph himself is elevated to a status of not like all the tribes, but avrech, a soft father when he's called Avrech. He's elevated to a different position or status in the family. So his children somehow are rising also, and now they're going to be equal to the rest of the children of Jacob, not the grandchildren. And that really is why we have 13 tribes and not 12 tribes. We have the 12 sons of Jacob, but 13 tribes. The Ephraim and Manasseh take the place of Joseph, so we don't have the tribe of Joseph, and we have 13 tribes. Now, Paul, did you want to ask something?
I have a question,
Yes.
which is a little troubling to me
Mm-hmm.
about the progression, where children come from. If I remember, Dinah was Joseph's sister.
Mm-hmm.
She was raped,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave birth to a daughter who was ultimately adopted by Potiphar and his wife. And that daughter was Osnat, who Joseph married and is the mother of Ephraim and Manasseh. Just
Mm-hmm.
as the family is closer than we normally accept nowadays.
Well, he married his niece, but that's also a midrash. That's not in the text. So
Ah, okay.
let's take that into consideration. It's a midrash. So it's not in the text. But even if he married his niece, that's acceptable actually. And there are still communities, usually ultra Orthodox, that marry the niece. You can't marry the nephew. That is in the Torah forbidden in Leviticus 18 when when the list of all the illicit relations are listed. But yeah, and we also believe that of course Abram and Sarah were related either actually because he said Abraham, she's my sister from one side, not the other. So they were half sibling. But cousins are very common, you know. But yeah, a niece and an uncle is permissible until today. Okay, so he now says he's elevating them not just in status, but he says, and they will get the inheritance of the land. So, you know, we know that once you include somebody in the inheritance, that really means that you are, you know, you have elevated their status, just like, you know, an adopted child, right? Still, he or she is like your child, and they inherit you. So he literally takes them as children, and he gives them part of the inheritance and he says right after that, and that is a big question in the Talmud. Right after two verses later, he says, Joseph looks at Jacob looks at Joseph's children, and he says, "Who are these children?" Now, in Hebrew, when it says "mi ele," who are these children? Um, that's a mind-boggling question because he just not only recognized them and gave them inheritance, and now he's asking who are they? It doesn't make sense. So of course, you can apply the principle in the Torah that there's no earlier or later. So maybe he asked them that before, but that doesn't make sense either because then why would you? It doesn't really serve any any purpose to put this verse here, even with the principle of earlier and later. So the rabbis tell us that this is actually when he's asking who are these children, he's asking him, are they Egyptians or are they Jewish? Are they Hebrew? Who do they subscribe to? So we like you would ask a about American Jews. Are they what are they? Are they American first or they're Jews first? Are they could be American, but are they still Jewish in heart and still fulfilling the commandments? That's what he's asking them. And Joseph replies, he says, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Bring them, and I pray for them, and I will bless them." So Joseph tells he understands the question. And that's why it makes more sense that this is the question. It's not asking them about, who, if they are biologically your children, but are they like you, Joseph, that Joseph is the symbol of a Jew who lived in exile, just like his father before him, that lived for 20 years in his uncle's Laban's house, that wanted to really uproot all his faith. And when he meets Esau, his brother, later on, and he says to him, "Im Lavan garti," I lived with Lavan, with my uncle. But the rabbis looked at the word garti, I lived with. That first of all, the word garti is not just I lived, but it's also I was afraid. To be lagur is to be afraid. So he was afraid. He lived under oppression for 20 years, but he fulfilled the 613 commandment. The word Gauti, the numerical value of the word Gauti is 613. So that's really the concept and the example of a Jew that goes to live among the nations, but yet maintain their identity. So Jacob asks Joseph, "Are they your children? Are they like you?" That, and of course, they are in even bigger disadvantage because they were born in Egypt. And not only were they born in Egypt, they were born to Joseph, who is very assimilated in one sense, right? He manages Egypt. So they have many challenges that way. Yes, Paul.
We have a handful of Jews that came to Egypt. Joseph and his brothers was at 13 men. Okay. By the time of Exodus, there were hundreds of thousands of Jews. There's
Yeah,
something about the arithmetic. They were very busy men.
absolutely. That's what they were saying. So they came down 70 people when they came down to Egypt. And then 4 generations later, that's what they're saying. Like it's Moses is 4 generations after Jacob. They were not hundreds of thousands, they were like could be the millions, because the just the men who left were 600,000. So they exponentially grew, and that was the what of course led to their enslavement, because Pharaoh saw how fruitful they became, and he was afraid that they will take over. So he is now going to bless them, and he is blessing them in such a beautiful way, because this became the blessing that we bless our children every Friday night. Some people on Shabbat, but this is the blessing of the children. So, and we'll get to exactly, it's a very short blessing, but very meaningful. But before he blesses them, Joseph has to bring them physically to his father. And Joseph brings the children, and he says, now Israel, he again he couldn't see, and this is very interesting because when we were talking about the actions of the fathers will project in the children. Isaac was right. Jacob's father was blind when he came to get the blessing from him, and now his grandchildren come to be blessed by him. And by the way, at the end, he will bless all his children. This is at the end of the parasha. But right now, he starts with the two children of Joseph. And he says to him, I prayed so much to see your face again, which is very interesting, right? Because you think that they convinced him that Joseph died when they brought the bloody tunic. But as we said, there are opinions that say that he knew that Joseph did not die, but they orchestrated that just to get rid of Joseph somehow. And Jacob was more in mourning for not for the Joseph's death, but his that there was no peace in the house, and that they sold one of their brothers. So he prayed to see your face again and your children. And I have to think of what's going on in Israel, and what just happened with the hostages. When you see the parents, right, and their families, the sibling, when they unite, I'm sure you've seen those videos, which I personally think they're so intimate. I don't know why they're showing that, but it really is it's amazing to see that how they scream and yell and cry. And I mean it's you couldn't have a deeper feeling than that. So the yearning to see them again, that was only 2 years. And of course, with other hostages, it was longer. But that yearning to know that your child is somewhere that you can't reach, that they may suffer, that may be in bondage, and the when you hear the parents, they say how much we prayed. And there's one of the parents, I forget the name of the parent, but the father who, when normally when they reunited, they ran towards each other and they hugged, and they didn't wait for anything. Of course, they ran towards each other. But there was one father who said, I prayed for God to God this whole time to save my child. And I said, Shema Yisrael. So they showed them just before he could have run and hug his child, but he stopped and he said, Shema Yisrael. And then he said that Shehecheyanu and Vekiyamanu, that brought us to this day. So it was an amazing thing to see. He took that pause to thank God for bringing his child back. But that reunification is an amazing and deepest feeling. So Jacob is saying to him, I still can't believe I'm seeing you and I'm seeing your children. I was praying and yearning for so long. So Joseph brings the children, and he said, and the text tells us, the Torah tells us that he took Ephraim in his right hand and Menashe in his left, right? So Menashe was the first, so he should have held him with the right hand, but he was already setting it up for his father to bless the older with the right hand and the younger with the left hand, right? So, but Jacob does something else. He crosses his hand and he brings the right hand towards Ephraim and the left hand toward Menashe, meaning he reverses the order. and and then Joseph sees that he did it, but he already blesses them. He says, may God, before my father Abram and Isaac, that I walk, God who has been my shepherd all my life, long until this day. And this is a repeating concept with Jacob, the angels that walk in front of him. If you remember, when he leaves the land, he dreams about the angels. Then he sends angels to his brother Esau. He struggles with the angel. He's surrounded with angels, so he knows that he's protected. And he says that that angel that protected me is just a beautiful, beautiful blessing. And he said, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abram and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Okay, so he's blessing them in a beautiful blessing. And Joseph, when he sees that his father crossed his hands, he doesn't like it, and he really is upset about it. He's displeased, and he literally takes the hand of Jacob and moves them. But Jacob tells his son Joseph, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. This is not a mistake. And even if you think that it's, again, I'm somehow uh, creating preferential treatment, I know what I'm doing." And what he says, and his father refused to move his hand, and he said that the brother, he also, that Ephraim will also, Menashe, the older, will also become a people, and he will be an important person and great. But truly, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So what he says essentially is um, what God said to Rebecca when she had the two fetuses in her womb, and she went to God to ask, and he said, "These are two nations, and Rav Ya'avot Tza'ir, the older shall serve the younger." At the end, so this, it's a concept. Who knows why this is the concept for us? But it's telling us that God has his own order. It's not the human order that we think, but we need to go with the blessing that God gives the people. So it doesn't seem like Joseph then resists anymore, and then he gives them the ultimate blessing that we bless our children all the time. This is the second part of the blessing, that the angel that protected me will protect these children. But then he said, and he blessed them that day, saying, "By you shall Israel bless." Israel bless. And he says, God will make you, Israel, everybody, as Ephraim and Menashe, and let them be set Ephraim before Menashe. So what does that mean? Why is all the people of Israel should be like Ephraim and Menashe? So the answer is, I mean, there's of course different ways to look at it, but there's something, and this is why I prefaced this shiur today by saying that there's drama without drama. I mean, this so dramatic that Jacob crosses his hand, and that and that Joseph's trying to change his father's hand's position, and then that he blesses the two children in a sort of a reverse order, putting the younger before the older. But that drama is silent, because what do we see that happens now? Nothing. Nothing happened. The older does not rebel. The older does not kill the younger. The older does not say, I will, when my father dies, I will die. I will come after my brother and kill him. Um, there's no, the older Metzachek in Ishmael and Isaac, when he laughed at him and was cynical about what he does. There was no such thing. These were children who were happy with their lot. They were happy with what God gave them and were not jealous of their sibling. And that, of course, is the model. That is what, so the challenge was not for the younger to accept that the older was born first and that's the law of nature. No, it's to accept the God's nature that you can be born first, but you're not as qualified as your younger brother. So you should be happy for them. We see that a little bit before with Aaron and Moses. When Moses comes back to Egypt, one of his concerns was about his brother Aaron, who's older than him. And when he says to God, Shlachna beyat tishlach, send your messenger, the ultimate messenger, the right messenger, not me. And of course, God at a certain point was upset with Moses that he keeps pushing back against his ordination. But one of the opinions is that he meant that God should send Aaron, his brother, his older brother, to be that messenger. But then we see, and God said to him, don't worry, he'll be happy to see you, and he will be happy for you that you were ordained to be the redeemer of the people of Israel. And when they meet, of course, Aaron is very happy to see Moses, and he's not jealous in any way. Later on, when they're in the desert, Miriam and Aaron speak badly about Moses, and she gets the leprosy, and they have to wait for a week and so forth. But for the most part, they were peaceful that way. But Jacob seizes that, but that's later on, right? Moses and Aaron, 400 years, whatever, at least 250 years later. But right now, the model is Ephraim and Manasseh. And that's really the beautiful thing. Another nuance and another meaning in this paradigm of Manasseh and Ephraim is that the names. So the word Manasseh is to forget. So to forget something is to put something aside. And Joseph calls his first child Manasseh because he said, God nishani, he made me forget my suffering. There's a concept in tshuva, in returning to life, is that you first have to reject the bad before you can embrace the good. So he does the same thing, and Moshe later on, Moses does the same thing with his two children. He has the two names that reflect these two phases of his life. The phase that he had to be removed, he had to be an immigrant, and then the time when he returns to his people. So and Ephraim means to be fruitful, lifrot, like pru urvu. So be a multitude. So it's important when we live our lives, just like when Abraham had to eulogize Sarah, he first eulogized her and then he cried for her. He didn't do the other way around. He didn't cry first and then eulogized and then accepted the blessings that she brought in her life. So the same concept here. You first have to have Ephraim. First you have to acknowledge the beauty, the blessings that God brings you into your life, and then you can remember out of that what pain and what journey you had to go through. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I thought to forget was shachakti. I forget.
It's also, but it's neshiyah, tehoma neshiyah. The when you go to a place of forgetfulness, or gid hanasheh, when Jacob fought with the angel, he hit him in the sinew that we call gid hanasheh, something that we want to forget that we want to forget that he hit him there.
And
So it's just another word. Yes.
my other thing is literally, you said maybe millions of descendants of Jacob stayed in Egypt. Egypt's probably predominantly Jewish and they don't know it. They should be our good friends.
Well, there are many, 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 many people who are discovering their Jewish, absolutely Jewish inheritance, a Jewish background. Because think about it, we're as old as the Chinese. So we should be a billion now, right? But of course, because of exiles, because of pogroms, because of everything else, we forced conversions. We're only 15, 16 million. But that means that there are so many, right? Crypto, as we say, crypto Jews out there. Absolutely. So, so then the other big thing that happens in this parasha is the blessing now of the rest of the children, and something happens here that the many commentators have different opinions of what exactly happened, and it's starting Genesis 49. And then after the episode with Joseph and his sons, he calls all his uh, other children, and Jacob called to his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you which shall befall you in the last days." First of all, this is the word achrit hayamim. This is, I believe, the first time that these words appear in the Torah. Maybe there was one more time, but there were altogether four times that it uses this term achrit hayamim, the end of days. So he tells them, he said, "Come and I'll tell you what will happen to you at the end of days." So they all gather, and then instead of telling them what will happen, he goes into certain blessings, but some of the blessings sound like almost demeaning. But it really, what he does, he calls their essence. He's telling them, which is it's a beautiful blessing, because what is really the blessing we just learned about Ephraim and Menashe, that the blessing is that they know their place. So the best thing you could have in life, and Paul, you said that last week, that the best blessing you can have is your self-image. And that's what he says to his children. He just points out to who they are, and they should really pursue it that way. So, but he doesn't tell them the future. So what was that about? Come, I'll tell you the future, but now I'm going to tell you something else. So the Talmud tells us that that God purposefully intercepted that and caused him to forget that he didn't want Jacob to tell his children the future. There are many ways to look at it. Why shouldn't you tell your children their future? It makes sense, because if you tell somebody the future, you're almost robbing them of their choices, of their lives. They should make their own choices regardless of of what will happen. And actually, the 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 second biggest theological question that is asked. Do you remember what was the number one theological question? We talked about it last week.
Suffering.
Why
Why do
good
people
people
suffer?
suffer? Very good, very good. Why good people suffer? So the other the one of the two biggest theological questions is how come the future is known? God knows the future. God knows what we will do, but yet the freedom of choice is given. How can that coexist? So one of the nicest explanation I heard is, but again, we live now in a time of GPS in our car, so it kind of overrides this example. But think of those helicopters that used to still I guess give the weather or the traffic, right? And say LIE is blocked from exit this to this, and I guess now we don't really need it that much because everybody uses GPS. But think of yourself on the road. You don't know what's going to happen at exit 50. You're at exit 60 now, and you don't know. And you call home and you say, "I'll be home in 10 minutes." But then you don't know that at exit 60, you're going to have 50, you're going to have a traffic jam that will hold you for 2 hours. So that's the idea. So God sees it as like the bird's eye view, like a helicopter. We on the road, we don't see what happened before and what will happen after. So, but that's a big theological question. But if you're going to tell the people already what's going to happen, you rob them out of their choices. So instead, um, so before we go to the blessing, the other opinion that is given in the Talmud is that not that he forgot, but he held himself. Not that God held him from doing it, from revealing the future, but he held himself. Why? Because he was concerned that one of his children is not there's a blemish there, just like in Abraham there was the blemish in Ishmael, and Isaac the blemish in Esau, and he was afraid that one of his children has this blemish. And when I say blemish, is not accepting the oneness of God, the what the Jewish people are now brought to the world, and are bringing to the world. So the Midrash says that this is where the children of Jacob said to him, "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." Listen, O Israel, Jacob, our father, God, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Which means we're all in this. You don't have to worry about it. And then he replied, what we reply silently, Baruch Shem Kvod Adonai Leolam Ba'ed, right? So this is he answered that to them. So that was the midrash, that they had this exchange, and now he was able to give them the blessing. Again, not the future. He never returns to that idea of the future, but he gives them kind of who they are, and we can go through it quickly. We're not going to delve too much into it, but just so to get the idea. And he starts with the older, and he says to Reuben, yes, Paul, you wanted to say something before?
Just one point in
Mm-hmm.
my life. Okay. Um, I believe that we're here to learn, that we're here to learn lessons. And I
Hmm.
think they're in our face all the time. And I notice I walk through the neighborhood and magnificent blossoms come out, beautiful flowers, incredible. And 2 weeks later, they're gone. And it's sad, it's devastating. Oh, where is that beauty that was wonderful? And lo and behold, the next year, we're back. And I think that is the nature of the universe, that we don't
Hmm.
go away, we get recycled.
Absolutely. I always say that everything in this world recycles. Water, energy, matter. We're part of this. Absolutely. One way or another, we are recycled. So then he begins the blessings with Reuben. He goes by the order of birth. And he says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of my dignity, and the excellency of power. So he gives a beautiful blessing. But he then says, unstable as water. So think of what he's saying to the children of his children. Um, just like Joseph was blessed by his father, and then Jacob was blessed by his father, and Isaac was blessed by his father. It's not just the blessing itself, it's the designation, it's the ordination, is who's going to be the next leader of Israel, right? So what Jacob did with Joseph, he gave him some sort of a place, a special place. He said, I'm doubling your inheritance. I'm giving you two portions. So he satisfied him. But he doesn't say to him that you are the leader. He's one of the leaders. But we will see in Jacob's blessing to his children who he really thinks is going to be the leader of the people. So he says to Reuben, you are my firstborn, and you are the excellency of my dignity and power. However, you are unstable as water. You shall not excel because you went up and to your father's bed. He slept with his concubines, with his father's concubines, and that's of course the disrespect, and it's the unstable like water, and then he said, "You are defiled me or defiled it, and you went up to on your father's bed." So that really is kind of how the Torah speaks in a clean language, that he slept with his father's concubines. Um, and then Shimon and Levi, he bundles them together, and he says, Shimon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are their swords. And what he's referring to is, of course, the killing of the children of Shechem when after Shechem ben Hamor killed, he raped Dinah, and they did this whole thing with them. If you circumcise on the third day, and then they came and killed all of them. So, and then he said, "Let my soul not come into their council, to their assembly. Let my honor not be united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self will they lammed an ox." So they can be very let's just say uh, angry, and then cruel, and um, so he says they can't be the leaders because they have that what's the word I'm looking for? Anger, or they're hot-headed. So then he says, "Curse their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." So they shouldn't be all together because they're too powerful if they'll be together. And we know that the Levites did not get the inheritance as one contiguous land, but they had cities within the other tribes, and they administered the temple. So they would come for their shift in the temple and go back to their cities, which were the refuge cities, the cities of the Levites in all the nations, all the tribes. So they were scattered. And then he says to Judah, Judah, you are whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Yehuda, Judah is the lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. And he stooped down. He crouched as a lion. And actually, crouch as a lion, of course, was the name of the operation that Israel just engaged in with Iran and all that. The lions, and as a lioness, who shall rouse him up? Meaning, don't mess with him. And of course, the symbol of Judah is the lion. That's why we have the lions of Jerusalem on a lot of times on the Ark of the Covenant. And then it says, the staff shall not depart from Judah, nor the scepter from his between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Shiloh is the Messiah, is another word for a Messiah, and the ordinance of the people be his. So it's clear who he designates to be the leader of Israel. And he continues. It's a very long, the two leaders of Israel, Jacob, Judah, and Joseph, receives longer blessings. He said, binding his fowl to the vine and his ass's coal to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. Meaning he will be affluent. He would live in a surrounding of wealth. And he says his eyes are red with wine and his teeth white with milk. So he will be healthy physically and spiritually. The teeth, of course, is part of the body, and the eyes, the blood, is the spirit. Of course, that's not a Christian or original idea. It comes from the Torah that the body and the spirit. So he will be happy in spirit and in soul. So the blood and the whiteness of the teeth is linked to the bones, right? It's a bone in one sense, and it's the bones come from the father, and the blood, the red, comes from the mother. The of course what the father contributes is the white, and the mother is the red, the egg. So so he is going to be healthy in both ways. And then he goes to Zebulun. He says, Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Sidon, of course, is in what today is Lebanon. And so that really means that Israel, the biblical Israel, goes all the way up to Syria. Issachar is a strong ass crouching down between the ship holds. So, he's a stubborn, he's a Issachar, the business person, and he saw that rest was good and the land that it was pleasant, and he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant to tribute. So we say that Yisachar, Issachar and Zebulun are the two brothers that together. So Zebulun is the merchant, the one that brings in the money, and Yisachar is the one that sits and learns. And in the yeshiva world, this is a this is a model that some people should just sit and learn. They should just be in the yeshiva, and someone should sponsor them. Those with money sponsor those who sit and learn. And then Yisachar, that's why his name, even though we pronounce only the one sin, but it's written with two sin. Yisachar, Yisachar. And the Talmud said that the double sin is that he gets double reward for him and his brother Zebulun, who sponsored him. And that's where we get the fact that, there are those who study Torah and those who support Torah. And they get the same sachar, they get the same reward. So then he goes to, you continue with.
Question?
Yes,
Deborah. There was no Torah yet.
There was? The what?
Officially, there was no Torah yet.
There was no Torah. Well, you're right. There was no Torah in Sinai, but they had the Torah before Sinai. They had the notion that you have to learn. There was an oral tradition that passed on the prophecies, and they had knowledge that did pass on from father to son, and they did need to sit and learn. So, but even if it's not the Torah per se with the scrolls and the all the commandments, that idea that that there are people who need to sit and learn knowledge and contain knowledge, and those who need to support their lives, the model that definitely can precede anything. It's even in ancient China, I don't know, but ancient Greece, and there were the philosophers who that's all they did all day. So there's a concept that we say that it's called Sinai, and Oker Harim. There's a Sinai. Some people are Sinai. They're like Mount Sinai. They absorb the Torah, the information, the law. But there are people who are Oker Harim. They are mountain uprooters. They take the knowledge and they pass it forward somehow. They know how to apply it forward. So there's always this model of somebody who is the kind of the source of the knowledge, and then he or she kind of gives it off to others. So so then we go to continue with Issachar, and he saw that rest is good, and okay, it became the servant to tribute. He gets the double credit, and then Dan shall judge his people. So the word Dan literally means to judge. He will judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. So he will judge them, but he won't be above them. He will judge them as one of the people. And then Dan shall be a serpent by the way, and adder in the path, that bites the horse's heel, so that his rider shall fall backward. So the rider, the horse's rider, is of course a horse and a rider is always the metaphor for war, for oppression. So Dan will be the justice system that will cause the oppression to fall on its back. And that's really what we want the justice system to be, that will halt back that will be the as we talk about in America, at least, the checks and balances, that one can't be too strong and be the rider over the horse. That's what he will do. He will bite that heel. So the rider, those who want to oppress, ride the horse, will fall off. And then I wait for thy salvation, O Lord, meaning, the justice system has to be, of course, with the hand of man, but also ultimately God is the judge of justice. And then God, that's my name, God, raiders shall maraud him, but he shall overcome at the last. So people will gather to kind of fight against him, but he shall overcome them. Asher, but there's also another way to read this in Hebrew, that God Himself will gather. God Gdud Yegudenu. He will gather the troops, and He will Yagud Akel. He will then give the last blow. So he will gather the troop, but he will be the one smiting the head of the whatever enemy is. And then Asher, out of Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. So he is Asher. The word Asher literally means happiness, and he will be a happy person, and there'll be happiness in his camp. And then Naphtali is a hind let loose. He gives goodly words. So Naphtali is like a gazelle that runs very fast, and he will. So his literally he will be fast somehow, and actually the symbol, the emblem of the post office in Israel is Naphtali, is this gazelle. And then, but he also he will the breath of what he will say. He will have beautiful things to say. So, like we send a gazelle, we send our words. And then he goes to Joseph. He says, Joseph is a fruitful bow by a well, who branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attack him and shot at him and hated him, meaning the brothers hated him and the people around him, but his bow abode is strength, and the arms of his hands were made supple by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. And then he will be still, he'll fight back, and he will succeed. And it says, by the God of your father who shall help you, and by the Almighty who shall bless you with blessing of heaven above, blessing of the deep that crouches beneath, blessing of the breast of the womb. So, and it continues, the blessing of your father are potent above the blessing of your progenitors, to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separated from his brothers. So he will get compensated for the suffering that he endures. But he's also a leader, but again, not a leader as Judah. And then finally, Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them and blessed them. everyone according to his blessing, he blessed them. So we see that the blessing can be sometimes just as what the parents see in you and tell you who you are, so you can just build your life around that. So, and then the last part of the parasha is that Jacob and Joseph are born both. They both die, and they are buried. One, Jacob is buried in Israel. Joseph goes to bury him in Ma'arat Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah, where all the forefathers before him and mothers are buried. And then he comes back to Egypt, and then at the end, Joseph dies, and he's put. It says in a sarcophagus. They mummified him, and he's there too. But he asks, he really makes the his brothers swear that one day when they go back to Egypt, to Israel, they will take him with him. And then lastly, what I was going to say is that there's a when Joseph's brothers saw that their father died, they were afraid because they thought now Joseph is going to take revenge at us, and they were very afraid. And he says to them, this most beautiful, of course, and the most important theological concept that we talked about last week, when he tells them in a different way the same thing. And he says to them, and Joseph said to them, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God? I'm not going to kill you. I'm not God. God circles here. He moves things in circles in this world, and he decides. And he decided that I should go down to Egypt so I could eventually help you survive." And then, of course, this is his immortal phrase. He says, "But as you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good." That is basically, if we live like this, that would make us happy, and like Ephraim and Menashe, that each person has their role, and God takes them on the journey that they are supposed to go on, and that is the real blessing, and then we can live in peace with each other.